everyone. Thank you so much for your emails and for watching these. I have been ill, and I just wanted to let you know that I am so sorry that I haven't been able to get to these. Right now, today, I'm going to do Chapter 9 from The Witch of Blackbird Pond. Normally, I would do a summary for Chapter 8, but because this chapter is so long, I'm going to trust that you have watched Chapter 7 and 8, and so are just now continuing with Chapter 9. If not, just go and watch like the end of Chapter 8, and you'll kind of be caught up on where the story is. Today we are starting with Chapter 9, and so here goes. Good children must fear God all day. Parents obey. No false things say. By no sin stray. 6 voices chanted the words in unison. 2 small heads bent earnestly over each of the 3 dog-eared primers, which were all the dame school could boast. "That's fine," praised Kit. "Now go on." Love Christ alway, in secret pray, mind little play, make no delay in doing good. At the opposite end of the kitchen, Mercy, having generously allotted to Kit the primer readers, was laboring with the beginners. They sat hunched on the bench, each holding in hand a horn book, a small stout-handled wooden slab on which was fastened a tiny sheet of paper, protected by a thin strip of transparent horn, held in place by a narrow leather strip and tiny brass nails. At the top of the single page was printed the alphabet, and at the bottom the Lord's Prayer. The children wore their horns strung on cords around their necks. Now they squinted at the blurred letters and painfully repeated out loud, A, F, F, A, Fa, A, 1, Al, L, Ah, La. What patience Mercy had! If only patience were contagious like mumps. Kit sighed and turned back to the primer. Of all the dreary, monotonous sermons, Grandfather would never have allowed her to learn from such a book. She wished she could remember how her grandfather had taught her the syllables and words. She suspected that he had made up his own lessons, and now, as her small pupils spelled out the gloomy text, she could not resist following this example. She seized a quill pen and printed 2 lines on a scrap of the curly birch bark, which the children collected to use in place of costly paper. She passed the little scroll to young Timothy Cook. Timothy Cook jumped over the brook, he read with astonishment. The other children giggled. "Right, what about me?" begged a dark-eyed little girl. Kit thought a moment and then printed out, "Charity Hughes has new red shoes." The 6 children followed every motion of her quill with breathless eagerness. Kit had no idea that her methods were novel and surprising. She only knew that the past 10 days, since the dame school had begun, had been the pleasantest she had known in Connecticut. She and the children had taken to each other at first sight. Kit felt at ease with them, as she had never managed to do with their elders. The children admired her pretty clothes. They brought her strawberries and daisies. They argued over who would sit next to her, and every day they waited with delighted expectation to see what she would do and say next. 11 of them in all, 8 small boys and 3 girls, ranging from 4 to 7 years in age. Sober little adults they had appeared on that first day, dressed in fashions much like their parents. One of them, to Kit's amazement, had given his name as Jonathan Ashby, a serious, stocky, small edition of his brother William. But as their shyness wore off, so did their solemnness. They sat crowded together on the 2 long benches that Matthew had provided by the simple method of laying planks on rough wooden crosspieces. There was a daily scrambling for favored positions on the bench. If 2 or 3 of the heavier boys could band together at one end, they could make precarious sitting for the unlucky female at the other end. Altogether, it took alertness and patience to keep those restless little bodies still for 4 long hours at a stretch. While Kit resorted to ingenious tricks, Mercy possessed the patience. Kit marveled at the ease and gentleness with which Mercy controlled her charges. Her warm, sweet voice never raised, her lovely composure never ruffled. Now, as the chanting syllables came to an end, Mercy met Kit's eyes across the room and smiled. "You have all done very well this morning," she said. "Now we will repeat the first part of the catechism, and then Mistress Tyler will tell you a story." Mercy worried about this indulgence, which had begun by accident on the second day, and proved such a success that she had weakly allowed it to continue. Was it right, she questioned Kit, to bribe the children into good behavior by these stories? That was not the way the schoolmaster enforced discipline. But Kit could see nothing wrong in a reward at the end of the day's work. Truth to tell, she looked forward to the story as eagerly as the children. If only she had more to read to them. Last week she had told them the story of Pilgrim's Progress, drawing on every detail she could remember. What would she have given for that much loved volume that had lain on Grandfather's table? But in a week's time she had stretched her memory to the utmost, and Pilgrim had traveled all the way from the Slough of Despond to the Celestial City. Now she had only the Bible to read to them. But there was far more between those black covers than the verses Uncle Matthew favored. Kit chose the stories she herself enjoyed most, and her reading had a zest and liveliness that enthralled the children. Even Mercy was surprised, and frequently a little disturbed at the drama that Kit seemed to discover in these long, familiar narratives. Today she chose the parable of the Good Samaritan. "Now, a certain man," she began, "went down from Jerusalem to Jericho and fell among thieves." Suddenly she had an inspiration. Years ago her grandfather had taken her to see a masque in Bridgetown, in which a troupe of players from England had acted out the ancient Christmas story. "I have an idea," she cried, laying down the book. 11 small faces turned toward her eagerly. It had not taken them long to discover that Kit's ideas usually meant something new and exciting. "You all know this story, don't you?" The heads nodded earnestly. "Then instead of my reading it to you, let's pretend that it is happening right now to us. Let's pretend that this room is the road to Jericho. One of you, Peter, you will be the certain man traveling along the road. You can walk down between these benches like this. And the 3 of you can be the robbers that set on him and strip him of his raiment and wound him. Martha and Eliza, you can be the priest and the Levite who pass by on the other side, and just look at him and turn up your noses. And Jonathan can be the Good Samaritan, who finds him and binds up his wounds. Charity, you can be the innkeeper, over here by the fireplace, and the Samaritan will bring the traveler to you to take care of. Kit, broke in Mercy anxiously, I never heard of anything like that before. Are you sure? Oh, Mercy, it's from the Bible. Now each of you try to imagine just how you'd feel if you really were those people. Just make believe it isn't a room at all. It's a hot, dusty road. And Peter, you're getting very tired from walking so far. The children were entranced. A game of pretending in school? They took their places, jabbering with excitement. Charity picked up the broom by the hearth and began to sweep. An innkeeper is busy all the time, she said importantly. Jonathan Ashby stood stolidly beside Mercy, waiting for his chance to be the rescuer. Peter began his long journey between the benches. But Kit had made one mistake. She had picked her characters too hastily. By chance, she had chosen the 3 most obstreperous pupils in the school to be her thieves and robbers. And the hapless boy who represented the traveler was the priggish little scholar that they most cordially disliked. The unsuspecting traveler fell into his part as conscientiously as he read his primer. He walked primly between the benches from Jerusalem to Jericho. Out from behind the settle popped the robbers and set upon him with a vengeance. Wait a minute, warned Kit. Tom, Stephen, we're only pretending. But her warning was lost in the uproar. Such an opportunity, sanctioned by authority, had never been known before. Peter's raiment actually was in danger. His shrieks were genuine. Jonathan, forgetting his role entirely, rushed in with both fists flying. The innkeeper hurried to the wayfarer's defense with her broom. Both Kit and Mercy moved quickly, but not quickly enough. From the corner of her eye, Kit glimpsed the 2 tall figures in the kitchen doorway. Then, before she could reach the tussling children, a cane swung from nowhere and landed on an unwary back. A smart crackle of blows, a few agonized howls, and silence and order descended suddenly on the room. Across the subdued children's heads, Kit and Mercy faced their 2 visitors. Mr. Eleazar Kimberly, the school master, and the Reverend John Woodbridge. What is the meaning of this disturbance? Demanded Mr. Kimberly. We come to inspect your school, Mistress Wood, and we find bedlam. Mercy opened her mouth to explain, but Kit broke in first. It is all my fault, sir. I was just trying out a new idea. What sort of idea? Well, sir, I was reading a story out loud to them from the Bible, and I thought instead it might be more instructive, maybe, to sort of, well, to act it out and to act it! Like a play, you know, Kit floundered, confused by the increasing horror on both their faces. Mr. Kimberly seemed to be strangling. Play acting and with the Bible! Reverend Woodbridge stared incredulously at Mercy. What could you have been thinking of, Mercy, to allow such a thing? Mercy clasped her hands tight together. I didn't realize what we were doing, sir, she faltered. I never thought that it was play acting. "I am shocked and disappointed," he said sternly. "I had heard such excellent reports of your school." Mr. Kimberly flourished his cane at the silent children. "Go directly home, boys and girls. The school is dismissed. Do not come back tomorrow. We will send word if the school will continue." "Oh, please, Mr. Kimberly," begged Kit, as the children, one by one, slipped through the door and escaped. "You can't not continue the school because of what I did. It wasn't Mercy's idea at all. Dismiss me if you like." Mr. Kimberly fastened upon her look that was well known in his classroom. "Most assuredly you are dismissed, young lady," he said coldly. "We will have to consider seriously whether or not Mercy is responsible enough to continue such a position." When the men had gone, neither girl spoke a word. Mercy pulled herself about the room, righting an overturned chair, straightening out the scuffed primers. 2 great tears ran slowly down her cheeks. The sight of Mercy's tears was more than Kit could endure. If she looked at them for another instant, she would fly into 1,000 pieces. In a panic, she fled out the door and down the roadway, running blind to reason or decorum, past the meeting house, past the loiterers near the town pump, past the houses where the pupils lived. She scarcely knew where her feet were taking her, but something deep within her had chosen a destination. She did not stop until she reached the Great Meadow. There, without thinking, she left the pathway, plunged into a field, and fell face down in the grass, her whole body wrenched with sobs. The tall grass rustled over her head and hid her from sight, and the meadows closed silently around her and took her in. When Kit had sobbed herself out, she lay for a long time, too exhausted to move or to think. Perhaps she slept a little, but presently she opened her eyes and became aware of the smell of the warm earth and the rough grass against her face. She rolled over and stretched, blinking up at the blue sky. The tips of the long grasses swished gently in the breeze. The hot sun pressed down on her so that her body felt light and empty. Slowly the meadow began to fulfill its promise. All at once, with an instinctive quickening of her senses, Kit knew that she was not alone, that someone was very close. She started up. Only a few feet away a woman was sitting watching her. A very old woman, with short-cropped white hair and faded, almost colorless eyes set in a deep, incredibly wrinkled face. As Kit stared at her, she spoke in a rusty, murmuring voice. "Thee did well, child, to come to the meadow. There's always a cure here when the heart is troubled." For a moment Kit was too dumbfounded to move. "I know," the murmuring voice went on. "Many's the time I've found it here myself. That's why I live here." Kit stiffened with a cold prickle against her spine. Those thin, stooped shoulders, that tattered gray shawl. This was the queer woman from the Blackbird pond, Hannah Tupper, the witch. The girl stared, horror-struck, at the odd-shaped scar on the woman's forehead. Was it the devil's mark? "Folks wonder why I want to live here so close to the swamp," the soft, husky voice continued. "But I think thee knows why. I could see it in thy face a moment back. The meadow has spoken to thee, too, hasn't it?" The cold feeling began to pass away. In some unexplainable way, this strange little creature seemed to belong here, so much a part of this quiet, lonely place that her voice might have been the voice of the meadow itself. "I didn't really intend to come here," Kit found herself explaining. "I always meant to come back, but this morning I seemed to get here by accident." Hannah Tupper shook her head, as though she knew better. "Thee must be hungry," she said, more briskly. "Come, I'll give thee a bite to eat." She hitched herself awkwardly to her feet. Reminded of the time, Kit leaped up and shook out her skirts. "I must go back," she said hastily. "I must have been gone for hours." The woman peered up at her, her eyes almost lost in the folds of the leathery wrinkles that had a humorous gleam. A toothless smile crinkled her cheeks. "Thee better not go back looking so," she advised. "Whatever it is, thee can stand up to it better with a bit of food inside. Come along, 'tis no distance at all." Kit wavered. She was suddenly ravenous, but more than that, she was curious. Whatever this queer little woman might be, she was certainly harmless and unexpectedly appealing. Like the school children, she had accepted Kit without a question or suspicion, and like a child, she scuttled ahead now, confident that Kit would accept her in the same way. Giving way to her own impulse, Kit hurried after her. Late as it was, she was far from eager to return to her Uncle Matthew's. The little hut with its sparsely thatched roof sagged at one corner. It looked as though it could never survive a stiff wind, let alone a flood. 2 goats munched at the edges of a small vegetable patch. "There's a well behind the house," said Hannah. "Draw some water and wash thy face, child." Kit let the bucket down, leaning over to watch it meet the far-off circle of reflected sky. The water was deliciously cold on her hot face, and she gulped it thirstily straight from the bucket. Then she smoothed her hair and retied her apron and went into the little house. The one small room the house contained was scoured as a seashell. There was a table, a chest, a bedstead with a faded quilt, a spinning wheel, and a small loom. A few ancient kettles hung about the clean-swept hearth. From a square of sunlight on the floor, an enormous yellow cat opened one eye to look at them. Hannah had set a wooden trencher on the table with a small corn cake studded with blueberries, and beside it a gourd filled with yellow goat's milk. She sat watching as Kit ate, taking nothing for herself. Probably Kit thought too late, swallowing the last crumb, that was every bit of dinner she had. The girl looked about her. "'Tis a pretty room," she said, without thinking, and then wondered how that could be when it was so plain and bare. Perhaps it was only the sunlight on the boards that were scrubbed smooth and white, or perhaps it was the feeling of peace that lay across the room as tangibly as the bar of sunshine. Hannah nodded. "My Thomas built this house. He made it good and snug, or it wouldn't have stood all these years." "How long have you lived here?" Kit asked curiously. The woman's eyes clouded. "I couldn't rightly tell," she said vaguely, "but I remember well the day we came here. We had walked from Dorchester in Massachusetts, you see. Days on end we'd been, without seeing another human being. Someone had told us there would be room for us in Connecticut, but in the town there was not an inch of land to spare, not after they'd seen the brand on our foreheads. So we walked toward the river, and then we came to the meadow. It put us in mind of the marshes near Hythe. My husband was raised in Kent, and 'twas like coming home to him. Here is where he would stay, and nothing could change him." There were 100 questions Kit dared not ask. Instead, she looked about the room and noticed with surprise the one ornament it contained. Jumping to her feet, she seized from the shelf the small rough stone and held it in her hand. "Why, 'tis coral!" she exclaimed. "How did it get here?" A small, secret smile brightened the wrinkled face. I have a seafaring friend, Hannah said importantly. Whenever he comes back from a voyage, he brings me a present. Kit almost laughed. Of all the unlikely things, a romance! She could imagine him, this seafaring friend, white-haired and weather-beaten, coming shyly to the door with his small treasures from some distant shore. Perhaps this came from my home, she considered, turning the stone in her hand. I come from Barbados, you know. Do tell, from Barbados, marveled the woman. These seem different somehow. Is it like paradise, the way he says? Sometimes I mistrust he's just telling tales to an old woman. Ah, everything he has told you is true, Kit answered fervently. 'Tis so beautiful, flowers every day of the year. You can always smell them in the air, even out to sea. Thee has been homesick, said Hannah softly. Yes, admitted Kit, laying down the stone. I guess I have. But most of all, I miss my grandfather so much. That is the hardest, nodded the woman. What was thy grandfather like, child? Tears sprang into Kit's eyes. No one, since she had come to America, had ever really wanted to hear about her grandfather, except Reverend Bulkley, who had only been impressed by his royal favors. She scarcely knew where to begin, but all at once she was finding eager, incoherent words for the happy days on the island, the plantation, the long walks together and the swimming, the dim, cool library and the books. Then she came to the flight to Connecticut and all the bitterness and confusion of the past weeks. I hate it here, she confessed. I don't belong. They don't want me. Aunt Rachel would, I know, but she has too many worries. Uncle Matthew hates me. Mercy is wonderful, and Judith tries to be friendly, but I'm just a trouble to them all. Everything I do and say is wrong. So, thee came to the meadow, said Hannah, patting the girl's hand with her small, gnarled claw. What went so wrong this morning? She listened, nodding her head like a wizened owl, as the tale of the morning's woes came pouring out. As Kit reached the part about the schoolmaster and his cane, to her amazement a rusty chuckle interrupted her. Hannah's face had crumpled into 1,000 gleeful wrinkles. Kit hesitated, and all at once the memory struck her funny too. Her breath caught tremulously, and then she was laughing with Hannah, but instantly she sobered again. What am I to do now? She pleaded. How can I ever go back and face them? Hannah said nothing for quite a long time. Her eyes studied the girl beside her, and now there was nothing childlike in that wise, kindly gaze. Come, she said, I have something to show thee. Outside the house, against a sheltered wall to the south, a single stalk of green thrust upwards, with slender rapier-like leaves, and one huge scarlet blossom. Kit went down on her knees. It looks just like the flowers at home, she marveled. I didn't know you had such flowers here. It came all the way from Africa, from the Cape of Good Hope, Hannah told her. My friend brought the bulb to me, a little brown thing like an onion. I doubted it would grow here, but it just seemed determined to keep on trying, and look what has happened. Kit glanced up suspiciously. Was Hannah trying to preach to her? But the old woman merely poked gently at the earth around the alien plant. I hope my friend will come while it is still blooming, she said. He will be so pleased. I must go now, Kit said, getting to her feet. Then something prompted her to add honestly, You've given me an answer, haven't you? I think I know what you mean." The woman shook her head. "The answer is in thy heart," she said softly. "Thee can always hear it, if thee listens for it." Back along South Road, Kit walked with a lightness and freedom she had never known since the day she sailed into Saybrook Harbor. Hannah Tupper was far from being a witch, but certainly she had worked a magic charm. In one short hour she had conjured away the rebellion that had been seething in the girl's mind for weeks. Only one thing must be done before Kit could truly be at peace, and without speaking a word, Hannah had given her the strength to do it. Straight up Broad Street she walked, up the path to a square frame house, and knocked boldly on the door of Eleazar Kimberly. And that's the end of chapter 9. I'm going to stop here today so I can get this posted, so I won't have so many eager emails for the next chapter. I hope to have chapter 10 done by Friday and up already, so please continue to enjoy the story, and it has been my pleasure to read to you. May God bless you and keep you. May He make His face shine upon you and be gracious to you. May He give you peace. Have a great day. Bye.